Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. In this conversation, I chat with Amy Athey, who shared her insights from her rich background in psychology and human performance. She emphasized the crucial role culture plays in shaping dynamic startup communities as well as productive work environments. We also delved into practical strategies for nurturing a positive team climate and the impact of health on overall performance, exploring everything from the health belief model to the challenges of culture change. So, for anyone leading a team or looking to enhance personal well being, this episode with Amy and her experience and advice are truly enlightening. And that's a topic I'm really obsessed with and really curious about. So, I genuinely enjoyed this conversation. I think you will too. Let me know what you think. Amy, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So when we initially met via LinkedIn, my favorite platform, of course, for these sort of things, I was so impressed with your background. And I said, as you were talking about your background in performance and psychology and behavior change, and I was like, oh my God, you're like my dream background that I want. And so I'm very excited to talk to you because, these topics of behavior change and well-being and what does it really mean and how to actually apply it is super interesting to me personally, but also to my audience. And I think it's very needed in today's world and always, honestly. So before we dive into all of that, give my audience a snapshot of your career and kind of, give us a little insight into what impact are you trying to make in the world?
Awesome, thank you. I should start off. My career has been just a fascinating journey. I started out really, I guess, most notable is I was a collegiate athlete and played basketball, All-American player at Roanoke College, and earned a business degree. And yet, at that time, this was kind of mid to late 90s. It really wasn't a great fit for a whole host of reasons. I pursued then the AmeriCorps service program and had an opportunity to branch out of my comfort zone and really started noticing a strength and passion, which was working and helping people live their best lives. From there, I went back and pursued my graduate training in clinical psychology, and it's really kind of just taken off since. The journey has looked different early on. I worked a lot around resilience, trauma, crisis intervention. My mentor, Dr. George Everly, I responded to Ground Zero with him and also helped people after Hurricane Katrina or the Virginia Tech shooting. So really incredibly stressful or adverse events. But then really kind of day to day transformed into helping people with what I consider normal problems. All of us deal with our life journey with loss, challenge, transitions, really looking for ways that we can optimize our performance goals, our personal goals, and feel more fulfilled in our life. So I served as a leader in NCAA athletics, building out clinical and sports psychology programs. I like to say I made my way across the conferences from the ACC, SEC, and Pac-12. Along the way, am very big on being in service of the mission. So what I built at University of Oregon, for example, looks different than what I built at the University of Arizona. Around the time of the pandemic, had an opportunity to transition to higher ed leadership and served as chief wellness officer at the University of Arizona. Really tapped because of my history building non-traditional wellness and performance support. So we implemented Wildcats Rise, which was resilience in stressful events. It was a peer psychological first aid support system designed to help lift the overall mental health and wellness support for the community of 45,000 during the pandemic. And we also implemented coaching into the academic departments to help improve retention and successful completion metrics. Um, Along the way, as I mentioned, my home state is the state of Virginia, and given the personal challenge of raising my children away from family, had the opportunity to return to my home state. And not only was it the personal kind of connection, but also an amazing opportunity to join the human performance team at Naval Special Warfare Development Group. For those who may be less familiar with U.S. Special Forces, that's a Tier 1 organization where operators have been Navy SEALs for about for a good amount of time. They've been at other groups, and then they come to that tier one command for really unique mission sets, and had an opportunity to serve on that interdisciplinary team, serving those operators and leadership. And now here I am, most recently, kind of full circle, coming back to that business space. In early, I guess, the start of the year, I transitioned full time to leading Athey Performance. We're a firm that delivers customized coaching, training, and speaking events, leveraging an interdisciplinary human performance model. So I bring with me a fantastic team, where we are looking to be able to provide that coaching holistically and serving the whole person, or the whole team. And I should say, I probably am remiss to ending on this note, but really my full-time job, I raise two children. I have two girls who are in high school. One is graduating this year, and my passion is fueled, always has been fueled, really by wanting to leave spaces healthier than which I entered. And then once I became a mom of girls, it took on even additional meaning for me. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I love them. Every time I hear your story, I'm just continuously impressed and really grateful to be able to chat with you today. There's so many things I want to cover, and as I said, I could probably talk to you for hours, but I want to really dive into some things that I think are not often covered in in the organizational space, and let's kind of start with that. So before we start recording, we were chatting about, there's a lot of talk about performance and productivity in the workplace and so on, or, company culture, but this is what we want to stand for. But we forget a very important piece of the behavior change that goes hand to hand in making sure that some of these things come to fruition. So let's dive into the behavior change, let's say just at your performance in an organization. Like, what does that look like? Give me some examples based on kind of some challenges that you have seen that people or organizations struggle with.
Sure. And it's a great question, and something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So I guess I'll answer the question speaking more at an individual as well as that collective organizational level. For individuals, there's a reason why the executive coaching space has boomed, the life coaching space, the desire for therapists has boomed. If going to the self-help section at your local bookstore, clicking on your favorite Instagram reel or TikTok post, or even your favorite podcast like yours, if that information and boost in knowledge was sufficient for change, we wouldn't need those other supports. But we know, if we look at the world's best performers, all of them had those relationships and that coaching, an added element, enabling them to grow and essentially change to pursue their goals and to achieve their dreams. Um, so knowledge is not sufficient for change. It's important and we need it, but it is not sufficient. So when I look at working with individuals, what's the disconnect between, I know it would be helpful for me to wake and go to bed on a regular routine. I know it would be great for me to get 30 minutes of moderate exercise a day, or to pick up that phone instead of just blasting off a benign text, but actually connecting with that mentor. I know all of these things, and yet I don't get it done. Um, so when we talk about behavior change, I'll speak to the organization in a minute. I really start with the small steps. And I think I recently put on my Twitter or LinkedIn, just asking a question like, in less than 5 minutes today, you could start or stop doing just one thing. Imagine if you did that and committed to doing that every day. And in 90 days, what might your trajectory look like? Oftentimes we get overwhelmed and thinking, I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to achieve this performance sprint this quarter. I want to make this much money or invest this much money. Like, it feels daunting. And so what do? If we can break it down to very small, manageable steps, attach that start or stop doing action to something that's already routinized. So I brush my teeth twice a day at least. if there's a health or wellness behavior that I could attach to that already really formulate, like ingrained habit, I'm more likely then to keep rolling day in and day out. So start small and let it build and accrue. And you'll be surprised to see, hey, things start shifting. You can do that with mental habits, you can do that with actions, external as well. So that's kind of where I think of behavior change and working with individuals. And then coaching, frankly, it helps having that accountability and that support and that guidance, and then also that troubleshooter to help modify the challenge along the way. For organizationally, I think of this similarly. I hear a lot about culture building. I certainly appreciate the role of culture. I do a lot of work around climate. And this is borrowed from the influence of work of retired Colonel Joe Thomas. He is a fantastic leader at the U.S. Naval Academy. He has done a lot around leadership development. Culture in our industries are pretty hard. I mean, think of truly moving a Titanic. If I say to you, what is the culture? How would you just describe the culture of the startup community or the fintech community or the manufacturing goods industry? There's probably some like large aspects of those cultures of those industries. If you're a company within them and you're a brand new company, it might feel like that culture is more malleable versus if you've been around for 75, 100 years. So I come back to things that we can influence and control more readily. Climate. If I'm holding my team meeting, irrespective of that company culture, irrespective of that industry culture, that climate, that experience that we influence in that hour meeting of interactions, how we set the stage, how we respond to each other's engagements, connections, challenge, conflict, how we wrap that experience. Similar to that individual behavior change and the small habits. Imagine if every hour you walked away from that team engagement feeling, despite the challenge, maybe even conflict, feeling connected. Maybe you walked away feeling motivated, energized, more optimistic, more have a sense of clarity on the specific action at hand and feeling competent and supported to execute, even if it's something new and feels risky. And we layered those meetings one day after the next day, after the next week, after the next month. What ends up happening is the larger kind of like large Titanic system of culture does begin to shift. So I always come down to what's in your influence and control.
Yeah, there's so many interesting points, and I'll start with the culture piece. It's I agree, it's very hard to shift the culture. There's, there has to be some like a lot of intention to be able to do that, and there's so much buy-in that goes into when we're talking about culture in organizations. From an individual perspective, something you mentioned is around the kind of baby steps that you can take. But you know what's the problem with that? What the people listening to this, probably it's not a magic pill. And that's what we want these days, right? And it sounds so, and it's like, and what you're saying is very practical and everybody can do it. Yet, what is it that stops us from doing it? You know what I mean? Like, why is it that we are so engraved to go for the magic pills, for the fast fixes, for et cetera? It's I don't know what it like. Is it? Do you think it's the media? Do you think it's the environment people are in? Like, do you know? Because it's like it's common sense, like very logical. If you just do something consistently, you will see results. And it's so almost easy to reach your goals, yet so many of us don't do it. Any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on why is that?
Yeah, I mean, I also think there's an interesting model where it's referenced as the health belief model, where you have to consider what are your beliefs, attitudes, how your value around maintaining the current course,
Mm,
um, and then also the risk benefits of that course compared to the small step that you may take today.
mm,
And you're right, that immediate gratification is likely not going to be there. You know,
mm-hmm,
um, how can you leverage that knowledge or that information to help really raise your keen awareness to the fact that there may be greater benefit in doing something that 5 minutes or stopping something in that 5 minutes and doing that consistently over time as compared to the current course I'm on. I'll give you an example. So I'm 49. And as a former athlete, it has been a challenge in these last few years. I suffered an injury, but nonetheless, a challenge with just natural changes in my body. I can't drop weight like I used to. I can't
Mm.
just eat whatever I want and what I have noticed is I really lost a lot of strength, muscle strength, which all of this and combined also the interplay was that I noticed being a bit less stress resilient,
Mm.
physically, fatigue and injury. So anyhow, I started like just raising my awareness. I have some good friends in the industry. Honestly, I listened to a couple of influencers, thought leaders putting out information on the impact of the hormonal changes of menopause and perimenopause, and coming to understand that even more, recognizing that for every year that now, after a woman is 40, the decrease in muscle strength that happens, it starts raising my awareness and I start thinking about what do I want in 10 years, in 15 years? I if my children choose and this is and the cards all stars all align, I would love to be a grandparent. But I also want to be a very active grandparent. I want to be able to get down on the floor and play with cars or trucks or run around in the yard and kick the soccer ball. And so for me, I set the vision onto the dream of where I want. And I think about now where I am with my new information, my new knowledge, and recognizing the risks associated with staying the same course of what I was doing
Mhm.
far outweigh the benefits of making that change of 30 minutes of changing a different workout routine in order to reach and hopefully have that dream.
Mm.
So that's kind of how that weighing those risks and benefits of keeping the course, as well as then what does that look like if I took this on?
Yeah. No, it's an interesting point, yeah, because it makes sense to have those values tied in, right? And like associate the benefits, the costs associated with that change. And also environment matters, right? So if you don't have that positive environment that helps you drive, or if you're not exposed to like podcasts and understanding, being curious about how to better take care of yourself, it's hard to do for sure. It's interesting that you mentioned the hormone thing because I think we're listening to the same podcast these days. So I'm on a little bit of a different journey, and I'm actually trying to start a family. And I was so career driven, most of my life and still am. And I've started to explore the impact of hormones in general and how it impacts our performance, our productivity at work, and so many other things, but also just our overall health and me being a woman, the health of being a woman and trying to reproduce and so on. And what's interesting that I've been thinking about is, well, one, if anybody's listening to this and you're thinking to start a family, start sooner than later because apparently there's so many things. And I'm a trainer, and and like I think like I care. I've always been active and so on, but it's like there's so many things that we're not aware of. But then the biggest thing that kind of stood out for me, is something I was listening to recently, is how our current work environment is just not designed for us to thrive as humans, let alone women. So I'm not even going to go on the women side. I'm going to try to keep it objective for both. I think it's just not healthy for either side. Our the just the way we work, the 9 to 5, the corporate, the stress, the BS that we have to deal with at work, that then causes the stress and causes our cortisol levels to go up and down, which then adds to weight gain or inability to lose weight or infertility or a numerous number of just other things. So talk to me about, and the reason I want to talk about from an organizational perspective is because so many organizations are like well-being, like try yoga, and there's a lot of memes around it. But we're not really addressing that maybe how we work is not suitable to us as human beings.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of which direction to go with that one. Because yes, and I, like you mentioned earlier, could talk with you for many hours. So again, I kind of fall back to what is in your control or influence and what is not. Um, Even not just with work, you can make the same argument for our school hours, for our children, right? We have
Mhm.
some school systems who are recognizing the impact of circadian differences of across the ages and making adjustments to school start times. We have some who are not, with your work schedule, there are some of us who are in positions where we have more flexibility. There are some workers out there who it is what it is.
Mhm.
That's out of your control. So I'm big for looking at ways, given those real life constraints, whatever they may be, schedules, on-site versus remote versus hybrid, attire, like there's some wardrobes that are going to be appropriate in some environments, some not. First off, asking yourself, to the extent that you have influence and control, like what do you need? And what are going to be deal breakers in that environment versus ones that you can make adjustments to, um, not just tolerate, but then be able to still perform and sustain that performance over time, given those real life demands. Because
Mhm.
none of us can work in our ideal environment. It just doesn't exist, right? So I look to empower individuals to first be aware of what they may need and hopefully finding positions where that is more closely aligned. And for those gaps that are brought on by real life constraints, how can we find ways to mitigate the impact of that load on our systems? In the high performance environment, there's a term called allostatic load. Allostatic load is simply a term used to capture all of those stressors, good and bad, that are impacting our systems. And you mentioned cortisol, right? Like, so that's one indicator. If you track and wear wearable devices and have an HRV, that's a measure of the impact of that on our system. If you use that outcome metric of HRV, we know that there's many things that impact one's HRV. I mean, I
Mhm.
can have a glass of red wine and tank my HRV in the shitter for one night,
Mhm.
Um, when you look at your work environment, it is going to be a little bit of this, a little bit of that. A yoga session is not going to do it. Are
Mhm.
you hydrating through the day? Are you maintaining some stability in your blood sugar? That means you need to eat breakfast. You need to have some snacks. You need to have a balanced meal, ideally of less processed foods, right? Where you're not spiking your sugar with a tons of pretzels and carbs and then feeling the drop. Are you moving? Or is it easy to sit there and just grind, grind, grind on the computer, right? Are you getting up? Are you connecting with people? A recent study took a look at taking breaks. And what was fascinating about this was that people reported an improvement in their energy, as well as their cognitive focus and creativity, and kind of overall well being, with as little as a 1 minute break. The cohort, they gave 1 minute, 5 minute, 9 minute breaks. It didn't matter, even taking 1 minute. This is the whole thing of when you're in the office space, like the conversation at the water cooler, it is invaluable for performance. Get up,
Mhm.
go have that conversation. In that same study, it was really interesting. They took a look at those people who just watched a funny video for a minute, also reported having some improved energy. So if you're in a hybrid or remote situation and you're home alone, I'm home alone now, like that 1 minute break, you can still get up, walk around and do something to kind of recharge. Where's your sleep schedule?
Mhm.
How are you navigating conflict at work? It is truly the whole package, and finding ways to mitigate those things that are out of the stress that comes from things out of your control, really kind of turns the light back on ourselves to think about what are some ways that I can make deposits into me as I'm writing these checks that I have to write. And so that's kind of how I think about it.
Hmm. What do you think about the wearable devices, kind of the Aura Ring or Fitbits, the ones that track you throughout the day and so on? Any thoughts on the? I've always been kind of curious about them, and I wonder if it's going to stress me out more just to be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not fully recharged, and like,
Well,
what's
first
helpful?
off, um, so I've been kind of in high performance environments since kind of these devices came onto the market. Um, a couple of things that we have learned over the years. One, data can be helpful. If you want to lose weight, many people use a scale. Why?
Mm,
Because it's a data point that you can use. But if you talk to the world's leading weight loss management programs or those who are dietitians, they're not going to advise you to get on the scale sometimes every day, right? Depends on the program and the philosophy, but in general, they use it to track trends, right? My
mm-hmm,
goal this week is to lose a pound and a half, which is
mm-hmm,
more of a healthy weight loss goal, right? So data can be helpful, but in and of itself is not a behavior change program. A scale is not the same as a weight loss program or a weight gain program. Um, so in general, there are some people that like the data, the objective data. It's helpful, I encourage people to do some research around whether or not the device is what I call a tool or a toy. Um,
mm,
in the commercial marketplace, there are some devices that have really dived into the accuracy of that measurement. They've refined it. They have a number, long published papers. You mentioned a couple, but they're, with sleep tracking devices, there are a few that are very good in the accuracy of determining if you are awake or asleep. With sleep devices, there's none out there that are incredibly good on reporting sleep stages. So if your device is saying, oh, you spent X amount in REM and X amount in deep sleep, nah, probably a coin flip on whether or not that's accurate, mainly because we only determine sleep stages by brain waves, and there's no device on your hand or wrist that's really going to capture that. So lastly, I want to highlight a couple of things that we've learned that you mentioned, which is, yeah, but is this going to stress me out more?
mm-hmm,
There is a subset of the population that giving this information to every day when you wake up or, during your day, um, only then serves as fuel for rumination. And you kind of have to know yourself. Are you the kind of person that would use this as a helpful trend tracker? Understanding perhaps periods of time and and that data gives you some insight and to be able to make some subtle shifts to help optimize your wellness and performance. Great. Are you the kind of person who's going to get really obsessive about this? There are some people that we do not recommend even owning scales. Why? Because it
right.
gets so wrapped up in the number, it undermines their ability to optimize wellness. If you are one of those people, then I don't think it's a great idea. If you're one of those who can kind of keep it in check with the balance of understanding it's only one data point and how you feel when you wake up is just as valuable, then yeah. Lastly, I'll cite a recent study. They gave a group of people kind of environmentally sleep deprived them essentially. Out of 8 hours, maybe they only got 4. They woke up, they were told, got a great night's sleep. Had another group who got 8 hours, legitimate, good quality, good quantity sleep, woke up, their R score on whatever they reported was in the shitter. So they were like, no, it's not good. It's not good. You
Mm,
had a horrible night. Interesting enough, the group that was legitimately deprived rocked their day. I'm all right. I'm doing all right. The group who had great sleep, but were told you didn't
mm-hmm,
have a good night. I don't know. It was really rough. 60% of Olympians the night before they go out and land on the medal stand report having a bad night's sleep. So we understand that sleep is important, other aspects of wellness, physical activity, getting your steps in, HRV, heart rate, all of those metrics these wearables are measuring are important. Make sure the accuracy of the measurement is there. Make sure you know yourself and whether or not it's a good fit for you. And then track the trend to inform kind of subtle shifts that you want to make. And remember, it is just one data point. How you feel and how you make sense of that data is equally important.
Hmm. I love that. Yes, super interesting. I've been looking at some of these devices for like 2 years, and
Mhm.
I know a lot of people use them, and a lot of people looking at them. And I had the same sense. I'm like, I don't really need, like, I know when I wake up and I feel good, you
Mhm.
know. But I also know that, after I crossed 35, I've also starting to get aches that I didn't have before, and I think that's just part of getting, closer to 40s and so on.
Yeah.
So it's I think just listening to our body, but that's why you have to be so in tune with your body as well, right? Like listening, like after you eat something, after you drink something, how you slept, what time you went to sleep, what you do before you slept. I think all of that, which sounds like a lot of work, but I think once you get in tune with that, it's much easier to then track your own well-being, so to say, right? And of course, obviously, like annual physicals and blood work is all important as well, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely.
Um, I'm curious in the recent years, at least since I've been kind of exploring this field, and you've been doing this obviously for a lot longer, so maybe it hasn't been recent years, but recent years, and as far as I know, there's been a lot of research that came out around impact of just psychology, neuroscience, how our brain operates, and how it's connected to the world of work. So some of the programs that you do with organizations, how do you apply some of that psychology and research and just new learnings that we've come across?
Absolutely. So, the programs that we deliver, we really emphasize kind of three core performance tenets. And so, whatever the curriculum or the coaching is, or even the speaking engagement, you'll see the influence of these. So, one, we believe in the core foundation that one cannot perform if not well. So, this is really apparent if there's your favorite basketball team, the player goes down with an ACL. Of course, he's not going to be able to get or hurt. She's not going to be able to get out there on the court. But what does that look like for you in the workplace? What is that wellness to performance continuum? Sometimes it's a clinical disorder like sleep apnea. You need to treat it, right? Insomnia, depression, anxiety. But sometimes it's along the continuum of even a subclinical. So you're adjusting to a role change and the stress that comes with that, a life change, right? Dealing with loss, developmental changes, right? I mentioned my one daughter is graduating from high school and soon taking that's going to impact us, right? And in many ways positively, but it's nonetheless an impact or a load. I also think along that continuum, one cannot perform not well. On that, everything is performance, and so it could be optimizing those connections and those relationships, and even finding ways that you can be feeling more fulfilled in the work and achieving your goals. Second core tenet is what got you here won't keep you here. And so with our training programs, we look at ways that we can help um, further develop and optimize leadership skills, mental skills related to high performance. Many of us are very familiar with the iterative process in product development. I mean, I get a new iPhone. Well, I don't get one, but one seems to be dropped, a new iPhone like every 10, 12 months, right? But what about it for ourselves? And as we grow in our careers, take on different roles and responsibilities, maybe go from being an IC to a people manager to being able to lead a large division, how are we iterating? How are we evolving? And so when I look at developing any training program, I try to expose people to some fundamental tools to have in their mental skills toolbox to be able to take on the new challenges and opportunities more optimally. Um, and so growing out those tools are critical. Lastly, we're a firm believer that relationships are the agent of change. We're relational beings, and you can see the impact in this data across therapeutic relationships regardless of the theoretical orientation of the psychotherapy. We study after study shows the most potent agent of change is actually the therapeutic relationship. It doesn't matter if they're doing cognitive behavioral therapy or interpersonal process therapy or it's the relationship. We see the impact of mentoring in the workplace on retention, engagement, career sustainability, burnout mitigation. We see it in our life partners, the marital research around happiness fulfillment. And so we work very closely in developing training programs to customize and meet the needs of that individual team or organization. So our firm and kind of how I've always built it, I think I said this earlier, we're in service of the mission. And so I have found that being able to target, customize directly towards that need, that mission of accomplishing that goal and taking care of your people, that's where you'll see the success.
Very, very interesting. I like the three kind of areas that you hit on. And the first one is the more like, if, yeah, I'm super on board with that. Like, if you're not well, you can't perform. Like, that's the step number one. I think that's the one we skip often, and we just go for like everything else, and we forget about the individual at hand. So I admire that approach for sure. We could spend so much speaking on these topics, and I think each of these areas, but I'm mindful of the time. And before I ask you my last question, um, where can people find you? I know I think you produce some content around these topics as
Yeah.
well. So where can they follow you, connect with you, learn more from you?
Thank you for asking. Yes. So, atheyperformance.com is our website, and we are real excited that we will be launching a very quick hit podcast called Performance Pulse. Performance Pulse is dedicated to delivering immediate actionable strategies that people can use to um, optimize their individual or team performance. And those strategies and every Pulse hit, you're going to get a bit of the science. And then again, focusing on a keen takeaway that you can use readily in your lives. So they're about 2 minutes. They're going to be dropping soon. Hopefully, someone can kind of quickly use it and integrate it to improve their life.
As we brush our teeth in the morning, just
There
plug
you
it
go.
in, clear. There you go. Actually, that's a good idea because they say you have to brush your teeth for like a minute or 2 minutes or something like that. So that's perfect.
There you
I
go.
love. There you go. Tie it in with your brush teething, or teeth brushing. The last question I ask all of my guests, this kind of became a tradition on podcast, is what is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Hmm. Is this really true to me and what I really want? Um, our lives, I mean, they're packed, they're filled with um asks, and they're subtle. We don't even realize it, right? Like from our family, your kids, your friends, and in a good way, right? Oftentimes it
Mm-hmm.
feels like connections and it feels good to be needed and wanted from our team, our subordinates, our leaders, our community, our neighborhood, and every day. And it is if without kind of really reflection and I think being deliberate, it you can wake up one day and like, wait, this isn't this distress. It's because I'm doing things that I really aren't me. And if we can kind of just pause and just say, hey, like this is who I am, and this is what I value and matters to me, and this is what I want to do. Oftentimes, while those decisions may seem challenging in the moment, in the long run, they create less distress because your actions are then congruent with who you are and your values.
Love it. I love it. Great reminder for myself and everybody who's listening. Thank you so much for your time. I
Thank
hope we get to
you.
speak again. Again, I think like we
I would
can
love
just talk
that.
for hours, and
Absolutely.
we'll make sure to do part two in the coming future. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much.